When James Alden burst through the grand front doors of his Manhattan penthouse, he expected to find the same quiet, orderly home he had left that morning. The air inside was still, the faint scent of lilies drifting from the vase in the hallway, and the sound of distant city traffic hummed beneath the silence. But as he set down his briefcase and stepped into the living room, a sound stopped him cold. It was a muffled scream. His heart clenched. The voice, small, frightened, was unmistakable. "Daddy, help." James didn't think. He ran. Past the gleaming marble floors, past the ornate glass railing, his Italian leather shoes pounding each step. When he rounded the corner into the kitchen, the sight made his blood run ice cold. A large man, his face half covered with a hoodie, was gripping his 8-year-old daughter Lily by the arm, dragging her toward the back door. Lily's wide hazel eyes were filled with tears. But before James could move, someone else was already in motion. A woman. Tall, with tightly coiled hair pulled back into a scarf, dressed in the plain gray uniform of the household staff, lunged forward. With surprising strength, she wrenched Lily out of the man's grasp and shoved the girl behind her. Then she swung a heavy cast-iron skillet with a crack that echoed through the room. The intruder staggered back, cursing in pain, before bolting out the door. James stood frozen, his chest heaving. The woman, Marcia Johnson, the maid he had hired only 3 weeks ago, turned, her face pale but her eyes steady. She was breathing hard, but she crouched down immediately to comfort Lily, wrapping the trembling child in her arms. "It's okay, baby. You're safe now," Marcia whispered, her voice soft and motherly. James felt his throat tighten. For a moment, all he could do was stare. He didn't know what stunned him more. The fact that an intruder had nearly taken his daughter in broad daylight, or that the quiet, reserved maid he had barely noticed before had just risked her life to save Lily's. Lily clung to Marcia as if she were the only solid thing in the world. The police arrived minutes later, sirens slicing through the city air. James answered questions mechanically, his mind still stuck on the scene he had walked in on. The officers combed through security footage, confirming that the man had slipped in through the service entrance, likely watching for weeks to find a moment when the house was vulnerable. But what lingered in James's mind was not the officer's words, it was the image of Marcia stepping forward without hesitation. When the chaos died down and the officers left, James found himself standing in the kitchen doorway, watching Marcia gently coax Lily to drink a glass of water. The girl's small fingers were still hooked around Marcia's sleeve. "Marcia," James said, his voice quieter than usual. She looked up, and for the first time, he noticed the small scar near her left eyebrow, the tired lines around her eyes, and the quiet resilience in her posture. "Yes, Mr. Alden. I don't even know what to say," he admitted. "You saved her life. My little girl," his voice broke, surprising even himself. He cleared his throat. "Thank you doesn't seem enough." Marcia shook her head slightly. "I didn't think about it. She was in danger. That's all that mattered." But James could see her hands trembling. Over the next few days, something shifted in the Alden household. James, a man who had built his fortune through relentless work and who was known among business circles for his cold precision, found himself lingering at home more than usual. He watched how Lily gravitated to Marcia, how the usually shy and cautious maid seemed to blossom in the little girl's presence. One afternoon, while Lily was napping, James asked Marcia to join him in his study. She hesitated in the doorway, clearly unsure why her employer, who rarely spoke to staff beyond instructions, wanted to talk. "Sit," James said gently, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. She perched on the edge of it, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I realized I don't know much about you," James began. "Where you're from, what brought you here? All I had from the agency was your resume." Marcia's gaze dropped to her hands. "There's not much to tell, sir." "Humor me," he said. There was a pause, and then she spoke quietly. "I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama. My mama raised me and my little brother alone. She worked herself sick cleaning houses. I left school early to help. Eventually, I came to New York hoping for better work, but things didn't go as planned. I ended up cleaning here and there, sleeping in a shelter for a while. The agency got me placed here 3 weeks ago. James listened, feeling an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. And your brother? Her voice softened. Got into trouble. Wrong crowd. He's in prison now. She hesitated, then added, I'm just trying to keep my head down, do my job, and send a little money back to Mama. James studied her for a long moment. She was maybe in her early 30s, but there was a weight to her that spoke of decades of hardship. And yet, when danger came, she had stepped forward without a second thought. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, James found himself pacing his study. All his life, he had believed money could solve problems. You paid for security, you paid for comfort, you paid for loyalty. But what Marcia had done couldn't be bought. He remembered the sheer terror in Lily's scream, the way Marcia had stood between his daughter and danger. He couldn't stop replaying it. The next morning, he made a decision. James didn't sleep much that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined a different ending to what had happened. One where he arrived too late. One where Lily never made it back through the kitchen door. Those thoughts were unbearable. By sunrise, he was in his office, sipping black coffee and staring out at the skyline. He had built his life on controlling every variable, making sure no risk went uncalculated. But the truth had hit him hard, his wealth hadn't been the reason his daughter was alive. A woman with barely 2 pennies to rub together had been her shield. When Marcia arrived that morning, James surprised her. Marcia, he said, stepping into the hallway before she could head to the laundry room, can you join Lily and me for breakfast? Her eyes widened a little. Yes, sir. They sat together at the long dining table. Lily, still in her pajamas, beamed when she saw Marcia sit down beside her. Marcia's my best friend now, she announced, and James noticed a faint blush touch Marcia's cheeks. As they ate, James asked more questions, not the kind a boss asks an employee, but the kind one human asks another. He learned that Marcia loved to draw in her spare time, though she hadn't had the money for art supplies in years. She once dreamed of becoming a teacher. She missed her mother's cornbread. Lily listened intently, interrupting with questions of her own. Can you teach me how to draw, Marcia? And can we make your mama's cornbread? Marcia smiled softly. Sure, sweetheart. We can try. Later that week, James asked her to ride with him when he dropped Lily at school. She hesitated at first, unsure why he wanted her along, but agreed. After they dropped Lily off, James pulled into a small coffee shop instead of heading back home. Marcia sat across from him, hands wrapped around a paper cup. You've been through a lot, James began. I know I can't change your past, but I'd like to change your present. And your future. She frowned slightly. I don't understand. I want you to feel safe. Secure. Not just here at work, but in life. That means a better salary, benefits, and if you're willing, I'll cover the cost for you to go back to school. Her mouth fell open, and for a moment, she didn't speak. Why would you do that for me? James leaned forward. Because you didn't think twice about saving my daughter. You didn't weigh the risks or think about yourself, you just acted. That kind of courage deserves more than a thank you card. Marcia blinked, her eyes glistening. Mr. Alden, I don't know what to say. Say yes, he replied simply. Over the next month, life in the Alden household changed in ways none of them had expected. Marcia started taking evening classes in early childhood education, something she'd once thought impossible. James bought her a set of art supplies, and she began sketching again, first alone, then with Lily, who quickly filled the refrigerator with drawings of her own. The three of them developed a quiet rhythm, meals together, school drop-offs, shared laughter over Lily's endless questions. For the first time in years, James found himself smiling without thinking about business deals or stock prices. But not everything was smooth. One afternoon, when Marcia was leaving her class, she spotted a familiar figure across the street, her younger brother, Darren, fresh out of prison. The last time they'd spoken, it had ended in shouting and slammed doors. He crossed the street toward her. "Mars," he said, his voice low. "I need your help." Her heart sank. She knew what he meant. He had no job, no money, no place to stay. "I can't get dragged back into your mess," she said firmly, but her voice wavered. "Please," Darren begged. "Just for a few nights. I've got nowhere else." That night, Marcia barely slept. She didn't want to jeopardize the trust James had placed in her, but she couldn't ignore her own brother. She knew a storm was coming. Marcia met Darren at a quiet diner 2 blocks from the penthouse. She couldn't bring him to James's home, not yet. The smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air as they sat across from each other in a corner booth. Darren looked rough, skinny, unshaven, his hands jittery. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I just need a place till I get back on my feet," he said, fiddling with a packet of sugar. "Couple days, maybe a week." Marcia's chest tightened. She remembered the boy he used to be, the one who would make her laugh until her stomach hurt, before bad choices and bad company had stolen years from him. "You can't stay with me," she said softly. "This job, it's not just a paycheck. It's a fresh start. I can't risk it." Darren's jaw tensed. "So that's it? You turn your back on family?" "It's not about turning my back," she said, her voice steady. "It's about not letting the past ruin what I've built." But Darren wasn't ready to accept that. 2 nights later, James was in his study when a soft knock came at the door. Marcia stood there, shifting nervously. "Mr. Alden, I need to tell you something," she began. "My brother, he just got out of prison. He's been asking me for help. I told him I can't involve him in my work or my life here, but I'm afraid he might show up." James leaned back in his chair. He could see the strain in her eyes, the fear she was trying to hide. "Do you think he's dangerous?" She hesitated. "Not in the way you're thinking. He's lost. And desperate. But desperate people make bad choices." James nodded slowly. "I appreciate you telling me. Whatever happens, you won't lose your place here. We'll handle it." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, but the worry didn't leave her face. It happened sooner than either of them expected. The following Saturday, Lily had just finished a drawing lesson with Marcia when the building's doorman called up. A man was insisting he knew one of the residents and wanted to come up. James's stomach sank as Marcia paled. "It's him," she murmured. James went down to the lobby himself. Darren stood there, hands shoved deep in his hoodie pocket, trying to look casual but failing. "I'm Marcia's brother," he said before James could speak. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I need to talk to her." James studied him, seeing the same guarded edge he had noticed in some of his own business rivals, the kind that masked vulnerability. "Come with me," James said finally, leading him to a quiet corner of the lobby. "I'll give you 5 minutes. Then you leave." When Marcia arrived, her eyes darted between the 2 men. "Darren, you shouldn't be here." "I told you, I've got nowhere," Darren said, his voice tight. "I'll sleep on the street if I have to, but I hoped you'd help." Marcia's throat tightened. "You can't stay with me. But I'll find you someplace safe. One night in a motel, food, but after that, you have to figure it out." James watched her. Torn between loyalty to her brother and the boundaries she was trying to protect. He saw the way her voice trembled but didn't break. When Darren left with a motel address in hand and some cash from Marcia's small savings, James walked her back upstairs. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. Her eyes glistened. "It doesn't feel like it." "Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't," he replied. But Darren wasn't done. 3 nights later, while James was in a late meeting and Lily was asleep, Marcia heard a soft tap at the service door. She opened it to find Darren, shivering in the cold. "Please," he whispered. "Just for tonight. No one will know." Marcia hesitated, heart pounding. If she said yes, she risked everything. If she said no, she'd be leaving her own brother in the freezing dark. She didn't notice Lily's small footsteps padding into the kitchen until a sleepy voice said, "Marcia?" "Who's that?" Marcia's breath caught. Lily stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, her hair sticking out in every direction. "This is my brother, Darren," Marcia said quickly, forcing a calm tone. "He's just stopping by." Darren gave a stiff wave. "Hey, kiddo. Why's he outside?" Lily asked, her curious gaze darting between them. Marcia knelt down so she was eye level with the little girl. "Because it's late, sweetheart. You should go back to bed." Lily frowned, clearly unconvinced, but she shuffled off toward her room. When she was gone, Marcia turned back to Darren. "You can't be here," she whispered urgently. "If Mr. Alden finds out." "Then tell him," Darren said, his voice breaking. "Tell him I'm not some threat. I just need a place to sleep where I'm not freezing to death." Marcia's chest tightened. She hated the thought of him out in the cold, but she also knew the rules of her employment, and the trust James had placed in her. "I'll get you blankets, food," she said firmly, "but you can't stay here." "Please, Darren, don't make this harder." Darren's shoulders slumped. He took the bag of food she handed him and disappeared into the night. The next morning, James returned early from his meeting in Chicago. He found Marcia unusually quiet as she prepared breakfast. Lily chattered about her art project, but James noticed the way Marcia avoided his eyes. When Lily left the table to grab her backpack, James spoke softly. "He came back, didn't he?" Marcia froze. Slowly, she nodded. "But I didn't let him in. I gave him food, that's all." James leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You were caught between protecting your job and protecting your brother." Her eyes met his, filled with both shame and defiance. "I couldn't turn him away with nothing. But I couldn't break your trust either." James was quiet for a long moment. "You didn't break it, Marcia. You proved why I trust you in the first place. You know where the line is, even when it's hard." Relief flickered in her eyes, but so did the sadness she carried whenever Darren's name came up. That weekend, James made a phone call. Through a friend in the business world, he found a non-profit program that helped ex-prisoners find jobs and temporary housing. He arranged for Darren to be accepted, paid for his initial lodging, and even covered the cost of a skills training course. When James told Marcia, she just stared at him, stunned. "Why would you do that?" "Because you've done more for my family than I can ever repay," he said simply. "And maybe it's time someone did something for yours." Her lips trembled. "You didn't have to." "I know," he interrupted gently. "But I wanted to." For the first time since she had started working for him, Marcia's eyes filled with tears she didn't hide. "You don't know what this means, Mr. Alden. You've changed more than my life. You've changed my brother's future." Months passed, and the transformation was undeniable. Darren completed his training and found steady work. Marcia was excelling in her classes, already tutoring children part-time. Lily thrived too, her world made brighter by the woman she now called her second mom. One warm spring evening, the three of them sat on the penthouse balcony, watching the sun dip below the skyline. Lily curled up in Marcia's lap, drowsy from a day at the park. James looked at them, feeling something stir in his chest, something that had nothing to do with wealth or success. "I used to think I had everything," he said quietly. "But I didn't. Not until you came into our lives." Marcia met his gaze, her eyes glistening in the fading light. "You gave me a chance, Mr. Alden. I just gave back what I could." He shook his head. "You gave more than that, Marcia. You gave me back my daughter, and a reason to believe in people again." The city lights blinked on around them, and for the first time in a long time, James felt that his world was exactly where it should be. Sometimes the people who change our lives forever aren't the ones we expect. James Alden thought his wealth could protect his daughter from anything. But it was Marcia Johnson, a woman with no fortune, no safety net, and every reason to walk away, who stepped forward when it mattered most. She didn't just save Lily from danger. She saved a father from the cold walls he'd built around his heart. And in return, James gave her what she had never been given before, a chance, a future, and the knowledge that her worth had nothing to do with her past. And maybe that's the truth we all need to remember: courage isn't found in bank accounts or boardrooms. It's found in the quiet bravery of ordinary people who choose to do what's right, even when it costs them everything. Because in the end, it's not the wealth we leave behind that matters. It's the lives we change along the way.